Hello everyone, Stephen Howson, joined today by Danny Higginbotham, and we are going to be talking about England's chances at the World Cup, how they're going to do. We're also going to touch on some of the other teams in the World Cup as well, and basically how we think the World Cup's going to go. We are going to be taking questions, so if you've got any questions for Danny, anything specifically tactical, because you want to see Danny's notes, I mean, he should be coaching the team for the World Cup. Get them in and we'll have a chat about them. So Danny, let's just get straight into it. Are England winning the World Cup or not?
I think that's a big ask. I'm optimistic as in terms of them doing well. I think for probably first time I can remember in a long time going into a major tournament, there's not a massive amount of expectation on them. I think that's a good thing. I think Gareth Southgate deserves a lot of credit for that. I think usually, in the media, it's like we're not going to put expectation on. And they fly out, and all of a sudden they're going to win it, whether it be the Euros or the World Cup.
Every single tournament in living memory.
I know, and then when they don't, they come back and everyone's saying, what are you doing, why have you not done that? So I think it's nice that the expectation's been lowered, and I think when you look at this England squad, it's more about a collective than individuals, and I think, like I say, Gareth Southgate again needs to take credit for that. It's not about these individual superstars. Okay, people talk about Harry Kane, but collectively, I'm really interested to see how they work together with a new system that's been used, and obviously it's been well documented as well.
The system's a big thing, because this is the first time I can really think in memory that England actually have got a system. Now we can get into the pros and cons and the rights and wrongs of this particular system, but it seems that this, more than any other England team, has got an actual identity to how it plays, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think what Gareth Southgate's done, I think he's been very clever. I think he's looked back at England's previous tournaments, in particular 16 and 14 in the World Cup, and look at the results that they had then, the games that they lost, the games that they drew. They dominated possession without actually going too far with it or doing anything with it. So I think when you play with a three at back, it gives you that ability to add an extra man in midfield. So whether that be, if it's Maguire or Walker on the outside, it gives them the ability to be able to go into midfield and a Dyer or a Henderson dropping deep, and then what happens is it becomes a domino effect. So if I'm a centre-back and I'm going out of the ball and you're an opposition midfielder, at some point you're going to have to leave one of my midfielders to come to me. And then that's the aim then, and then the domino effect, then all of a sudden the opposition defence gets taken out of line. And I think it's to try and do that, but I think the wide areas are going to be key as well. I think when you look at Trippier, Rose, if they're going to be the two wing-backs, I think one thing that England haven't done that well over the last couple of tournaments, they've not used the width to the best of their ability. They've always wanted to. Yeah, well, they've always wanted to go through the middle. And when you're playing against the lesser nations, the one thing they will do is be compact, be narrow and be deep, and they'll always give you the width. From my point of view as a defender, when you played against the big teams, you always had to give something up, and it would always be the wide areas, and you defend deep and narrow. So if you've got a team like England that are going to be playing Tunisia, Panama, that will probably sit deep, then in Trippier and Rose you've got two very good deliverers of the ball. Then you've got Harry Kane in there. Can you get more players in the box then to support him? So that's the way forward, in my opinion, from England's point of view, especially in the opening two games before they play Belgium.
From an England point of view then, when you do come up against let's say Panama, Tunisia, teams that are going to sit in this low block, you've, for the most of your career, played in teams that employ that sort of tactic to try and keep an opposition at bay. When you come to Old Trafford, you've got certain criteria that you're going to look for. Flip it for us a second. What do England need to do to overcome those teams? Where do you find the weaknesses in those teams?
I think what happens is you're always told, and like I say, I go back to when I was playing, and when you play against your Manchester United, your Liverpools, your Cities, your Chelseas, your Arsenals, so on, the teams that were always going to be the team that were in the ascendancy and dominate the possession. You always stayed compact, you always stayed narrow, you always stayed tight, because more often than not, that's where the goals were going to come from. So if anything, you would give the space to the wide area. So from England's point of view, they're probably going to go into these games, in particular Tunisia and Panama, knowing that Tunisia and Panama, they're going to want to counter-attack against England.
Absolutely.
They're going to defend narrow, there's no doubt about that. So that's where we talk about the wing-backs, that's where they become vital. And I think if you have the back three, and then you have whether it be Henderson or whether it be Dyer, there's the four players that are always behind the ball. I think whoever is alongside Dyer or Henderson or around them, they've got to get into the box, because the last thing you want is the wing-backs finding himself time and space in the wide areas and just seeing Harry Kane in there. So if you play with Rashford, if you play with Lingard, if you play with Sterling, whoever it is, they've got to get into the box. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that when the ball comes into the box, Kane's going to win it and he's going to score with a header every time. But what it does, it causes problems. So then it becomes a little bit of a second ball. And then you like Rashford, Lingard, Dele Alli, Sterling, are they going to be the first ones to react? And I think what happens is, if England can do that and can do that early, all of a sudden the opposition, then their whole task changes. They've got to open up, and that's why I think England, if they start the games quickly, can get an early goal, can really unsettle the opposition. It then works in their favour. They've then earned the right to dictate the tempo of the play, because question marks will be over England from Panama and Tunisia will break us down.
Do you think what we've seen at previous tournaments and what we see, being United fans, what we see at Old Trafford a lot of the time is that so often the striker gets isolated. We've got all the possession in the world, but no one's getting in and around in his feet, and we're not putting sensible balls in at that guy. Do you think that's a problem England can overcome, and how do you think we're going to overcome it?
I think they can overcome it. I think the problem that you've mentioned there, especially with Manchester United, and you can say about a lot of teams, there's not a lot of natural width now in teams. A lot of the times it comes from the fullbacks. Now, that's all well and good, that's fine, but then you're vulnerable to the counter-attack. So what can happen is, and I think one of United's problems this season has been because they've not had a settled back four, because they've not had that settled defensive partnership. There's been an extra bit of defensive mindset with players in midfield that usually would like to get further forward more. So from England's point of view, when they're going into the World Cup, I think it's so important that when they are getting the ball into the wide areas, not necessarily saying, can you get support for Harry Kane? Can you get enough players into the box? Because there's no doubt about it. I would probably say now that England against Tunisia, before the game's even begun, and the same with Panama, they're going to have so many opportunities to cross the ball into the box. But what you do see is dominant teams in the Premier League, some of the times, they don't want to put the ball into the box. Give you a prime example, Manchester United versus Chelsea in the FA Cup final. The amount of times they found themselves in wide areas but didn't put the ball into the box because they didn't really have that physicality.
Is that the mentality of the individual?
No, it's knowing the fact that if you're against three centre-backs, so, I know Azpilicueta is in there, but if you've got a Cahill and a Rudiger, you know that 9 times out of 10 they're going to win that ball. So unless it's a precise ball into the box, near enough a pass across the ground, it's going to be very difficult. Whereas if all of a sudden you're England, you see Harry Kane in there, and then you see someone like Loftus-Cheek coming forward from midfield, all of a sudden you see now more problems for the 2 centre-backs or the 3 centre-backs, whoever you're playing against. So therefore the crosses coming into the box, although you want it to be in a specific area, it doesn't have to be perfect because you've got that physicality in there. And then you've got the likes of the players I've mentioned, the likes of Stern, the likes of Lingard, Dele Alli, Rashford, whoever it may be, that are then coming in for that second ball. And that's something that I think England need to do more of, without question, because Harry Kane is absolutely magnificent in the air, but he's not going to put the ball into the back of the net with every single header that comes his way. He's going to be challenged, so it then becomes all about the second ball. And a lot of people say, there's a lot of purists out there, there's a lot of snobbery in football that will just say, let's go back to the 70s and the 80s. Some of the best teams that I've ever watched, some of the best players that I've ever watched were unbelievable traditional wingers and were unbelievable centre forwards. One of the greatest centre forwards that England's ever seen, Alan Shearer, absolutely magnificent in the air.
Lukaku plays in the 60s, would he?
So why not do that?
Yeah.
So why not do that if it's something that you're gonna that when you're playing against these smaller teams? What you're going to find if you play against Tunisia and you play against Panama and you say, right, we're going to dominate the middle of the pitch and we're going to go through that, it's probably going to be about 12 players in that area out of 22. And all of a sudden, if you look in the wide areas and go, well, hang on a second, I've got 2 wing backs there that are in plenty of space, they can take a touch. They're both fantastic crossers, whoever plays in the wing back positions. They've all got good delivery. So why not use that to the advantage? Get the balls into the box at certain times. The game against Belgium will be completely different. That's when I think England can then play on the counter-attack themselves. But they're going to have to do all the running in these opening 2 games and make sure that they're not open to the counter themselves.
I was just about to bring you onto the Belgium game. You've segued it perfect for us there. The Belgium game is going to be different to the first 2. And the Belgium game gives us a real teaser of what the latter stages are likely to offer. I see us coming second in the group and facing somebody like Poland. But let's talk specifically about this Belgium. That starting 11 Belgium, likely to have the same formation, I think. I think they're probably going to play 3 at the back. Probably 4 across the middle and then a 2 and a 1, I think, is roughly what it's going to look like, which I think is roughly what England's going to look like. What do England need to do to overcome that Belgium team specifically?
I think when the strange thing is, the way that England is set up now, the system that they're going to play, I think it's actually probably, I'm not saying they're going to beat the bigger nations, but I think it could actually work better against the bigger nations than the small nations, because the likes of Belgium, the likes of Spain, the likes of Germany, Brazil, they're going to want to dominate possession. I think that could suit England because England then have the pace to play on the counter-attack. So
you've got Vardy, Rashford, like as an outlet,
Lingard,
unbelievable.
You've got pace in the wide areas as well, so that can work in their favour. I actually think that when you look at the Tunisia game, I'm not saying the Belgium game is going to be easier than the Tunisia game, but I think from England's point of view, coming up against Tunisia could actually prove more of a problem than the Belgian game, just because of the simple fact of Tunisia are going to sit in there and they're going to say to England, right, okay, come on us, what are you going to do? What are you going to do are you going to be able to answer the questions that the likes of Iceland, the likes of Slovakia, the likes of Russia, the likes of Italy, Uruguay and Costa Rica have asked England in the previous World Cup, and they weren't able to answer them.
Poland as well recently as well we've had.
Yeah, so the problem becomes is then England have to become the problem solvers, where I think when they play against Belgium are going to be the team that are going to be asking all the questions. The higher they play, the more possession they have, the more space is going to be in behind. That's when that could really benefit England. But if England want to go into that game knowing that they're going to be safe and they're going to be going through to the next stage of the World Cup. But I think that game could take care of itself, and it could be a team and a game that really suits England the way that they're playing now, because I think this is a team very much set up to play on the counter-attack with the players that they've got in the team.
I've got a question for you then, which is Romelu Lukaku, with Eden Hazard playing off his shoulder and De Bruyne putting balls into him. If I'm Roberto Martinez, I'm telling him to go and stand on Kyle Walker. If Kyle Walker is playing right hand side centre half, how is Kyle Walker going to match up against Lukaku with those assets around him?
See, I think it'll be different. I think when England come up against Belgium, I think Lukaku would look to go the other side, because the one thing that people always tell you the problem is when you're playing with wing backs is that space in behind the wing backs, down the side of the centre backs. Now,
also going to target the space around Maguire.
Exactly, down the side of that, because the one thing all centre backs will tell you, don't get me wrong, the few and far between, there is a few that are happy to go into the wide areas. We've seen with Marcelo with Real Madrid, he loves going out wide. Ramos is quite happy to come over to that left hand side position. Not a lot of centre backs are happy to do that. So what I'd probably be doing is saying, right, okay, if you've got Trippier and you've got Rose, they love to get forward. They're very attack minded, very good full backs, very good wing backs. There is going to be a space down the side. So it might be a case of Lukaku, as he does for Manchester United, drifting over to the right-hand side.
Right-hand channel,
so that could be the interesting one. But this is where we talk about that being a game that might actually suit England more, because at times it's going to be a flat back five rather than a three with two wing-backs in front of them. So that might not prove to be as big as a problem, because England might actually be doing more defending in that game than they will be in the Tunisia and Panama game.
Do you think it's going to be the transitions, if Belgium are going to hurt us, a fast transition from De Bruyne to Lukaku in the space in that hole behind Maguire or to the side of Maguire is going to be where you think?
Definitely. We've seen De Bruyne this season for Manchester City. You can take 5 players out of the game with one pass. And the only thing, when you look at Belgium in the major tournaments, the only thing that probably stops Belgium in the other tournaments is bringing that team together. Because if you look at that 11 on paper, they should be in the final of the World Cup, but it's gelling everybody, and if they can do that, then they're going places, because it is their golden generation. There's no doubt about it. They were brought up, a lot of them brought up together. They've got phenomenal players in every single position in the pitch. They've got 2 centre halves, outside centre halves in Vertonghen and Alderweireld that have actually played fullback for Belgium before, and that's a massive positive for them, because they're both happy to go into the wide areas. We've seen Alderweireld as well. His distribution is second to none, turning defence into attack.
That whole back three, I think Martinez has set this team up to have those as a back three.
Yeah.
And everything else has just kind of had to fall into place to get the best out of them, because the midfield don't make a whole lot of sense. To be honest, especially if he's going to play De Bruyne as a proper centre mid rather than giving him the kind of free role, the sort of attacking number 8 that he gets at City. I think it's definitely been set up to get the best out of that defence, because I don't think I think there's so many different formations you could play with that Belgium team and get a great team out of it. That I have to think that he's thinking, we're going to play out the back, we're going to go defensive first, and this is going to be the rock on which the team is built. I think anyway.
I think what you'll see with De Bruyne, and I noticed it quite a lot for Manchester City, in a lot of games he tends to drop deeper and deeper and deeper. Now that's not because he wants to do the defensive side of the game, that's because I think he can be a player that can dictate play from high up the pitch or from deeper. He can thread them balls through the eye of a needle, whether it be a 10-yard pass, and we've also seen that he can play them 30-yard passes. So I think the idea from De Bruyne's point of view, you talk about a deep playmaker, near enough a quarterback, he can get on the ball, he can go and get the ball off the centre backs, and he can set opportunities up because he's that good, whether it be short passing or long passing. So I think what it'll be a back three, and then plays in front of him. You look at Mertens as well. There's going to be players there that are going to be given the freedom to go and do whatever they want to do. We saw in Manchester City, De Bruyne and David Silva constantly changing position. One would be deep, one would be high up the pitch. And I think that'll be the same for Belgium. When they're on the ball, have the freedom to go and do whatever they want to do.
And then you're going to have Dembele or Witsel,
Yeah.
providing a shield, providing a bit of energy and a bit of steel in the midfield, and Carrasco and Meunier as the wing backs. If there's any English tabloids right now thinking about saying England should top this group, or even giving England stick if they don't beat Belgium, you need to have a word. Let's have a look at your England 11 then, because it's a little bit different to what we expect is going to play.
Because, and this is what I'm looking at for the Tunisia game. Now, obviously, bearing in mind what we've spoken about before, the simple fact of, I think it's going to be an area where the wide areas are going to be key. So I've gone with Butland in goal. Maybe a little bit biased with the Stoke City connection, what have you. I think it's very close between him and Pickford. I
think it's very close between the three of them, to be honest.
Yeah, Pope's had a phenomenal season, hasn't he?
Would have been my choice, to be honest.
Oh, would he? Based on just the way he's performed this season?
Yeah, I think he's been excellent. I didn't expect him to fill his boots at Heaton at all, to be honest, and he's been fantastic. And I think the fact that out of all of them he's finished the highest in the table, I think probably carries a little bit of weight.
I remember speaking to the end of last season, spoke to Sean Dyche. Obviously, Keane was still there, Gray was still there. Obviously, Heaton was there, still
I
is
tipped
there.
them to get relegated after losing all them.
Did you?
I did.
Well, I spoke to him at the end of the season, and I asked him about his away form, and he said, you know what? He said one of the things is that as the season's gone on, we've actually got better. We've not had the luck, which obviously been shown this season. They've been absolutely brilliant away from home. I said to him, what happens when clubs come calling? So if your likes of Keane, your likes of Heaton, your likes of Gray, he says, what we do, we already have people in the background. It's brilliant. He said, we bring players in that we know can fit in seamlessly. We've seen it with Tarkowski, how he's done it. We've seen it with Pope. These players, as far as I'm aware, were already at the football club before they lost these other players. Heaton gets injured, it's not a problem, because all these players, they train together, and because of the way that Burnley play, one of my biggest phrases in football is simplicity is genius. You look at Sean Dyche, the way he plays, every single player knows what's expected of him. So if you've got a player that's not played for that first team, when they go into that pitch, they know what's expected of him because it's drilled into them all the time. And you've got to give him great credit for that. And Pope's shown that, no doubt about it. Tarkowski as well, been absolutely brilliant. And they signed Wood as well from Leeds. They all know what's expected of them. So I wasn't so surprised, but that was obviously from speaking to him towards the end of last season at how well they did this season. But yeah, it's interesting. And any one of them three you could go for. I think the big thing is going into this not like they did in the 2010 World Cup without an ideal number one. They seem to have that night. It does seem as though it's going to be Pickford.
Yeah, this is what he said. He's been fit for pretty much.
And then Walker, Stones and Maguire. I think that what you're going to find is that these three players, yes, they've got to be able to deal with counter-attacks, but I think in these opening two games, it's going to be about how good they are on the ball. We know that Walker can do a similar role to Azpilicueta, where he can break into that right-back position. We know that Maguire can stride into midfield, start asking questions of the opposition midfield, maybe drag.
I think he's a threat at set pieces.
Oh, huge! Well. We saw against Costa Rica, I think it was, and against, was it Costa Rica, where he was getting on the end of all the balls, or Nigeria, one of the two. He was getting on the end of everything, and he was so unlucky, not to get on the score sheet. And so he'll be a threat from that, obviously the defending side of set pieces, but I think him travelling with the ball as well. I was with Harry for a bit at Sheffield United, and people look at him and go, he's a bit top heavy. He's not. That's his body shape. He has, physique wise, he hasn't got an ounce of fat on him. That's his body shape, and that's how he is. When he gets going, he's a quick player as well, but he's very comfortable on the ball. And I think in order to try and create problems for the opposition of the smaller nations, you've got to shift around their midfield. Now, I don't think England's midfield can do that because they'll be heavily marked, but one of the three centre-backs can do that. It becomes a domino effect then.
Do you think it will be Maguire, or is it more likely to be Stones that's the one tasked with stepping out?
I personally would want one of my outside two to do it, because I always want my sweeper, I always want my one that's in the middle to be able to be there, because more often than not, that's where goals come from.
The biggest weakness of Stones is his defensive side. Do you want someone that's a bit more of an organiser, a bit more vocal, a bit more sound? Like if you think like a Baresi, you don't think John Stones? You
don't, but what I would say is that there should be a lot of protection there in them first few games. You're going to have Dyer or Henderson sitting in front. I'm not saying that Maguire and Walker will go into midfield and carry on going. I'm saying what they'll do, they'll take it forward, hopefully bring one of the opposition midfield out, pass the ball on to a midfielder and then drop back in. So there should be protection. I would always say, no matter who you are, you always have four men behind the ball so you can cover all the width of the pitch. So I don't think it'll be a major issue. And then in front, Trippier and Rose, Rose, in my opinion, I think he's absolutely brilliant. We know that he's had issues, we know that he's had injuries, and he's been very brave coming out and speaking about it, and I think it's probably done him the world of good. And his England performance recently I thought was outstanding. Trippier, arguably the best crosser of the ball in the England squad. First time crossing on the volley, absolutely brilliant.
First time crossing is a massive thing as well, isn't it? That's my major gripe with Ashley Young is how long he delays and he delays and he delays and he delays before putting a ball in. And I think that the centre forwards they're going and resetting it and they come back, and I think that gives an advantage to the centre halves when that's happening. I think
it's different. The one thing I would say is that Ashley Young has probably been one of Manchester United's most consistent players this year, and he's a right foot that's playing on the left, so at times he probably does want to get it back onto his right foot. So I think it's a little bit difficult, where if he was playing on the right hand side I think it would probably be very different, but it makes it more difficult with him being on the left hand side. I can only dream of going and playing right back and having to come back on left foot, and he's done an unbelievable job of it. But like you've just said, if you can get them first time crosses in, a centre half hasn't got time to think, then he hasn't got time to get his head up and look quickly where the centre forward is. And then Henderson just gets the nod over Dyer because of the role he does for Liverpool. He allows players around him. He does the dirty work which goes unnoticed but will be very much appreciated by his teammates and people that understand the game as well. And then I've gone for Loftus-Cheek. Now, the reason I've gone with Loftus-Cheek is a simple fact that I think he's brilliant. I think he can be a real wild card for England. I think he's unknown outside of England as in terms of what he'll bring to the game. I think his energy levels, I think his skill, I think his physique, he is the perfect type of player to play in that position in terms of he can get up and down. He'll have that licence to get forward because of Henderson. And all of a sudden, if we talk about the fact of Rose and Trippier getting in the wide areas, putting crosses into the box, if you look up and you see Kane, Sterling, Lingard and Dele Alli, you think to yourself, going to do well to win this header. All of a sudden you look up,
channel me in a Beckham here to get this in the box.
Yeah. Whereas if you look up and you see Kane and Loftus-Cheek, you're thinking, tell you what, we've got a great chance here. Not necessarily either of them are going to score, but what they are going to do is cause a problem. And if the ball drops down, that's when the players that are really reacting to it.
You? Especially Loftus-Cheek,
100%.
you have to deal with him. You can't just leave him.
No.
So you're going to have to deal with him, and that might be the gap that you need for someone else to open up.
And he's one of very few players that I love watching at the moment that is actually as quick with the ball as he is without the ball. He's a powerful player. He had a great relationship with Zaha at Crystal Palace. He'd start on the left. Zaha would then drift out on the left from the middle, and he'd come and take up that number 10 role. There's no reason in these first couple of games. I would love to see him play. I don't think he'll play. I'd love him to play. But there's no reason why he can't, in this system, be that sort of a number 10 that does drift, because when he gets on the ball you try stopping him, and I think what happens is when he gets into his stride, as we talk about the centre halves bringing the opposition midfield out, he'll bring one of the opposition centre halves out, and then if you've got two players playing narrow around Kane, all of a sudden jobs are good and you're going to create opportunities.
And with the rest of the players you've got Sterling, Kane and Rashford as the forward three, those are players have got the feet to be able to make something happen within that tight space, because that's where I think we're going to have to live in that space. Because like I said, Panama and Tunisia are going to sit deep. They're going to collapse the midfield, and there's going to be no room. But those three players, especially in this team, are the ones that you would go, I think they'll find a way.
Yeah, I think if you fast forward and if you look at the Belgian game, I think the Belgian game is a game where you could look at and say, right, we want to play with a number 10. I think that's fine, because what you'll find is, as we said previously, Belgium will dominate possession. So the more you dominate possession, the further apart your midfield and your defence becomes. Against Panama and Tunisia, the midfield and defence will be like that. There's going to be no space for a number 10. So it's what you can do around the sides of that. And people will say, well, Rashford should play through the middle. When I see a front three, I would be quite comfortable as a spectator, whether it be of the domestic club that I follow or the national team that I follow, to see in a front three two centre forwards, because what you can find, someone like Rashford, I think he played as a front man against Costa Rica, but the amount of times you saw him drifting out to the left hand side, he gets that ball, drifts out to the left hand side and can drive in.
He was told to play off and to play in between the lines.
Well, that's
what he was told, when he did it excellently.
There you go, and that for me is absolutely perfect. So when people say, well, he'll be only playing one centre forward, no, you're not really. You are playing with two centre forwards, but you're playing with a centre forward in Rashford that can come and join in. Now, I'm not putting him on the same level at the moment at all.
Clip this up.
at all. But remember Thierry Henry at Arsenal.
I think he was well more refined than Rashford. Rashford's a bit more raw pace and all the rest of it.
But he would he would drift into the wide areas. He would drift into the wide areas.
Come round the back as well.
Yeah. And then, more often than not, he'd find himself in the centre-forward position, but it was where he would get the ball. And I think Rashford, if he's able to drift into that key area, which is in between the left back and in between the right back and in between the right side of the centre half, that area is a nightmare for a defender, because if you're a right back, you can't come in and put a challenge on him, and if you're a centre back, you don't want to come out there. So I think
that's what I mean about the feet. If you come out to him, he's either going to dance past you, or that's when those angled runs of Sterling, who's excellent at that, or Lingard.
Yeah.
One of the angled runs from them, he's going to find him, a quick reverse ball, him and Kane in the box. You've got to fancy the chances.
Centre backs don't want to be isolated. You know, I can tell you from my experience. Okay, I played left back a lot and centre back a lot. When you're playing as a centre half, the reason you don't want to be isolated, because 9 times out of 10, if the centre forward gets past you, he's in on goal.
Yeah.
If the winger gets past you, okay, he might get across into the box, but you don't want to be isolated as a centre back. And in Sterling and in Rashford, I think they can isolate centre backs. And what I like about Harry Kane as well, people talk about him, why he's so good is that he doesn't have one particular goal that he scores. He uses centre backs to bend the ball around. He gets tap-ins, he gets headers, he scores free kicks, he'll score from 25 yards out. But what he's also very good at is dropping deep. And when he drops deep as a centre-half, it's a nightmare, because what do? Do you hand him over to your defensive midfielder? If your defensive midfielder's full, you've got to go with him.
Yeah.
All of a sudden
follow him,
there's a space for Sterling and Rashford.
I do think that is the asset that England team does have, is the pace and the fluidity of that forward three, and the movement, because it's the movement has killed England in the past when it's been easy to guess what they're going to do. It's obvious what they're about to do, and if you can restrict the balls coming into the box, either crosses or going straight through the middle, it's easy to deal with, isn't it?
I think what England have done in the past, and when you look at some of the players that England have had in their golden generation, me as a supporter watching them, I actually felt sorry for the players, because I don't think the managers at the time got the best out of them. You know, if we sat here and went through the 11...
Do it. Before we get into that, if you've got any questions for Danny, let us know in the comments, and I'm going to start picking some questions out from you guys as well. So get your questions in, and we're going to go start reminiscing about some top England teams.
Let's think. David James was in goal.
When we're going from 98. 98 was a chance we had. We had Michael Owen coming.
Yeah, I think 98 they did.
Who was centre half? Sol Campbell.
Sol Campbell.
Who was the other one?
Would it have been Southgate? They may actually have done all right, but I go even further on than that. So I look at, from my point of view, I look at and think, right, David James, Gary Neville, Ferdinand, Terry, Cole, Scholes, Beckham, Gerrard, Lampard, Rooney and Owen.
Was this 04, 06?
Probably wasn't far, probably around that time. That for me is an unbelievable team. But I look at this system now that Southgate is playing, and I look and I think to myself, right, okay, Walker.
Oh my God. So this is the 2006 England squad. So we had Paul Robinson, who was highly thought of at the time. Gary Neville, Ashley Cole, Gerrard, Rio, Terry, Beckham, Lampard, Rooney, Owen, who was not far off winning a Ballon d'Or at the time, Joe Cole, David James, Bridge, Carragher, Hargreaves, Jennings, Carrick, Lennon, Downing, Crouch, Carson, and with 17-year-old Walcott as well.
Unbelievable. And I look at that and I think to myself, I'm watching them games, and you actually I felt sorry for the players, because I just thought that the manager didn't put them out in their best possible way. Now, there was players being played out of position just
constantly,
and that wasn't right. You know, some of the best players, you know, it led to Scholes, I think, stepping away.
Did we even say Scholes now? I think he skipped that tournament, actually. Off the top of my head, I think he skipped that. He's not in that list.
It's unbelievable.
He's not in that list. And he was peak at the time.
Absolutely incredible. Whereas I look at this team and I think, right, yeah, you know, they're playing a different system, but there's only really Walker that I'd look at in that system and think, you're not playing in your massively dedicated position. You have played in that position for Manchester City, but the rest of them, I'm thinking, Trippier and Rose, wing-backs, full-backs are wing-backs now. Rashford, part of a front three. Sterling, part of a front three. Henderson, a sitter. Loftus-Cheek playing in midfield. Yep. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking that collectively that's brilliant. Whereas, like, that England squad that you just mentioned, that should have been going places. And my honest opinion, whether it be right or whether it be wrong, I think that it was. I don't believe that it was set up right to get the best out of them players, because from back to front you've had world class. You probably had it in 11. You probably had 10. You probably had 10. Not far off 11 world class players. Yeah. That is incredible.
pretty much most of that starting 11 was winning titles regular.
So you look what they were doing for the domestic team, you know, and people say, well, see, and this is one of the things, like people say, well, you know, what about when these players come together and they come from Liverpool, they come from United? What about Real Madrid and Barcelona?
Yeah, they don't like each other.
And so I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a group of players that were managed in a way, in terms of the system that was played, the way they were played on the pitch, that wasn't the best to bring the best out of them. Because I'm telling you, if they were managed the right way and brought the best out of them, they would have made a final. They would have made a final of whether it be the Euros or they've gone really far in the World Cup, because they were that good. They're all legends of the game.
That era game as well, the 2004 one when Rooney burst onto the scene, was like, oh my God, what have we got here? And then that 2006 one, which was, there was a lot of players peaking around that time, but then you still had, I think Rooney might have been 20 at the time.
Yeah,
that one.
He only been young.
Unbelievable. And and Michael Owen, that was still relatively fit.
Incredible.
Like, I think Beckham was in. I think he was in Spain at the time with Real Madrid, playing for them, and you think all of this experience, and we did nothing, did we? And the issue that I see with this England team versus that England team, yes, we've got a bit of a system, and there's clearly more togetherness than there ever has been, and there's less expectation. I see less first choice players in this team, though. Danny Rose, whatever reason, hasn't played a full season. Rashford played a lot of football for United, but in the last 6 months it's been mostly off the bench. Loftus-Cheek didn't play a full season, I don't think, at Palace. Stones has been benched since Laporte has come in. There's a lot of second choice players in this, and that worries me a little bit. That this isn't, but that might be a benefit.
I don't think it's a huge thing, because I think if you look at, not every year, but you know, a lot of times successful teams, I'm not saying successful teams that have won the Premier League but have exceeded expectation, it's been collectively. So the sums have been greater than the part. So you look at Atletico Madrid, you know, a few years ago, and they had that great run in the Champions League. They had a brilliant team, but collectively they were phenomenal. Burnley this season, collectively phenomenal. Leicester City when they won the Premier League, collectively. So it could be a case of it could go the other way and say, right, okay, yes, you've got Harry Kane there, and you've got some standout players, but collectively this could be a really strong group.
The parts actually fit and play
exactly,
and play nice together. Rather than, you know, too many egos perhaps for the 2006.
I don't know, because the one thing I would say is that my own honest opinion is that I don't think there's anything wrong with egos. The best players on the planet have egos. You've got to. That's what makes them the best. They know they're the best. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that collectively, when they were put together, it was a case of the managers probably looked at it and gone, right, okay, well, I want to play this system.
This should just work rather than...
Exactly. Whereas I'm very much of the mindset is, right, okay, this is my group of players. Regardless of how I would want to play as a manager, I've got to play the system that suits the players, not the system that suits me, because that's not necessarily going to suit the players. And I think if you do that, then the players are more comfortable. Now, everybody said, well, these three centre-backs, you know, they're not used to playing their back three. I don't think it'll be an issue for them, because more often than not now, most teams end up a back three with your two centre-backs and your one defensive midfielder. Centre-backs are asked to step out all the time. Now that's why centre-backs that are going for 45, 50 million pounds, the first thing that comes out of a manager's mouth is he's good on the ball.
He can play, yeah.
Exactly. So I don't see it being a major issue. So the collectiveness is in terms of what this squad could bring together could actually surprise a few. And I also think it's nice that the expectation levels haven't gone through the roof, which they usually do, because that brings pressure in itself.
But there's a lowest expectation in my living memory. But if they don't get out of the group, they'll be crucified.
But if they don't get out of the group, justifiably will they be criticised? It would be justified. I think we have to look at this and go, if they don't get out of that group, then
Tunisia and Panama have very low ranks.
Yeah, although Tunisia I think will cause a few problems. I think if they don't get out of this group, then, you know, quite rightly they could be criticised, because that is a good enough group of players to get out of the group. But I think in other instances, all right, not 2014 in the World Cup, and obviously what happened in Euro 2016, we big the nation up so much that the level of expectation, unless you get to the final, unless you win it, it's not going to be considered.
But would that have been all right in 2006? Would that have been justified to go to Germany and go, this team can win the World Cup? When we've just read through the list of
yeah. No, I think it would have been. Or you look at it and go, we should be looking at the semi-finals. I think that would have been justifiable. And my opinion is of why they didn't manage to managed to obviously get to the semi-finals, is okay, yes, they underperformed, but I don't think the team was played to its strengths, my own honest opinion, because if it was, like you said, them players, that 11, not far off every single one of them world class, and were, like you say, winning things domestically, standout players, competing hugely in Europe. They were all unbelievable players. So I then look at it and think, right, okay, from a manager's point of view, he should have done far better. They should have done far better with them players, because they're an unbelievable set of players. Probably the best England team in my generation. I love the 96, the Euro 96. I thought that was a great team. 1990 in the World Cup, getting to the semi-finals, and 98 as well. But as a whole, that would be the one.
I think that 2006 one is the biggest. Right, let's get into some of the questions. Everyone, please give the video a big fat like. It's 500 watching, it's only 91 likes. That's absolutely atrocious. So go and make sure to give it a like. I am going to go pick out some. I'm going to go for some meaty questions. So get a nice in-depth question for us. Rich says, I don't care England flopping as long as we just accept that we're not a great team, just do our best. The media are a nightmare, hyping people up. Kane shouldn't have said England could win it. That was probably a bad thing for him to say, to be fair. But again, he'll get ripped either way, because if he says we ain't going to win it, people will go, ooh.
You're damned if you do and damned if you don't, aren't you?
Here's a question. Nick Hill says, do you see Southgate playing Maguire against the smaller teams and then Cahill against the likes of Belgium?
I wouldn't. I would have a back three and stick with that back three, because, you know, it's a group of players that haven't played a lot together. There's a goalkeeper behind them that's just getting used to things, so you want as less movement around. I always say the higher up the pitch you go, the more you play off the cuff, so you can change players there. But my goalkeeper and my back five, I would want that to be solid all the way through. You want to get the understanding of each other, get to know strengths and weaknesses. That's why centre-back partnerships are absolutely vital, and that's why the successful teams have that standard centre-back partnership, and more often than not the full-backs as well.
4-4-2, often criticised in tournaments as something that England needed to evolve and needed to leave the English system behind. Probably going to be the formation of the World Cup, and England aren't playing it.
I love it. I've said it all along, and people have said, oh, I can't believe you've got to move with the times. Leicester City won the Premier League with 4-4-2. Atletico Madrid shocked big teams.
I hoped Leicester were going to go into the Champions League and play it, because I think they would have shocked people if they did.
I think that the one thing, right, so what it does, it gives you more power in the wide areas, because you get 2v1 going down the sides. The only problem that a lot you'll find now is that on one hand, you could probably name all the out-and-out wingers now in football. Everybody talks about Manchester United and says, well, why don't they play the Manchester United way with out-and-out wingers? Well, come on then, name me your Ryan Giggs.
Yeah, name five.
Name me your Conchelseas, name me your Sharps, name me your Beckham that will take that touch and put the ball into the box. So it's difficult, and you've also got to have a very unselfish centre-forward who's willing to drop in and make that extra man in midfield. But if you have that, I still believe that 4-4-2 will outdo any system around.
Akshay says, Dele Alli or Lingard behind Kane, does a Spurs link work for that, do you think?
Yeah, obviously the understanding between Dele Alli and Harry Kane is brilliant. Eriksen, Dele Alli and Harry Kane in tandem, you know, the three of them is enough to scare a lot of opposition in the Premier League. So yeah, obviously it gives him a little bit of a bonus there and a little bit of an advantage. But the one thing I'd say about Lingard is that, you know, he's now becoming the player that everybody hoped it would be, because he's been brilliant. I think Mourinho deserves a lot of credit for that, and he's been brilliant for England as well.
And I don't think he's got the credit for that.
He hasn't, because I honestly believe that people don't want to give Mourinho credit. I just don't. It's the way that I see it. You know, nobody's given Mourinho credit. First of all, you've got to give Lingard credit as well for improving the way that he has improved now, and he's an absolutely brilliant player. I think that was always going to be the hope, but I think Sir Alex Ferguson said that he's going to be a late developer. Well, you know, when he speaks,
all he changed in his game was that end product. That he was finding more final balls and he was finding more goals, because everything that he was doing, he's been doing for years.
Well, you could probably say the same to a certain extent about Sterling. That was his biggest problem, the final ball, the final finish for himself, and he's at that, and Pep Guardiola deserves a lot of credit for that. So I think instead of people looking and saying, well, you know, we give Mourinho credit for the way that Lingard's pushed on, instead of doing that, they turn it around and go, well, no, we're not going to give Mourinho credit because look what he's done to Rashford. What has he done to Rashford? You know, people forget that Rashford has already done more in his career than the majority of the class of '92 had done at their age, and they went on and had a decent career. People forget.
Yeah, some of them was all right, I guess. All right.
Absolutely.
I think at this age, David Beckham was on loan at Preston.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, look at the goals that he scored for England, look at the goals he scored for United. People forget Rashford's age. And I think that's what has to be brought into...
And let's be honest with ourselves here. I know you used to watch the 18s and that as well. He was an above-average 18s player. He wasn't Gomez. He wasn't what Mason Greenwood's been doing this season, where you go, oh, my God.
Yeah.
He was just like, looks tidy.
Yeah.
That was really it.
Yeah.
And then he took his chance.
Got his opportunity, didn't he?
Anybody I've ever seen take it. He grabbed it with both hands. What he did against Midtjylland, amazing. Follows it up the next week and does it twice again against Arsenal.
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit, signs a new deal. Bosh.
But that's the thing, you see, and I think what we do in this country, and that's why I'm so mindful of it. We haven't done it this year, thankfully, but usually when a major tournament comes along, we pin our hopes on this is the player that's going to win us the World Cup, whether it be Owen.
Surprisingly, not Harry Kane after the form he's been in. Actually.
Well, the only thing I can think is because he's a little bit older and he's a little bit more mature, but the weight of expectation is usually put on an individual, whether it be Michael Owen, whether it be Wayne Rooney, whether it be Joe Cole, as it has been in the past, whether it be, you know, Wilshere. There was talk about him as well over the years. And let players evolve, let players grow up, because I was asked a question about Dele Alli, like, a while back, you know, all this hype about him and now he's having a bad patch, this and whatever, is he the real deal? And I was like, whatever job you do, it doesn't matter what job you do, you have ups and downs, and especially if you're a younger player, because what you do, you come onto the scene, nobody knows anything about you.
And everything you do is mint. Isn't it?
Exactly. And it's like, oh, it's okay. Then all of a sudden it becomes, oh, he's expected to do that. Well, the next year, the defenders that are playing against him, the midfielders that are playing against him, they know more about him. So we're going to have a little bit of a lull. And I think we're just so quick here. Instead of saying about a young player, he just needs a little bit of time, just needs a little bit of a break, it's like, oh, he's not as good as what we thought. And it frustrates the life out of me, because you know these players are as good as what we think they are. But just because they haven't performed for 6 or 7 games, it's like, oh God, he's finished with. Instead of just taking that little step back and going, no, hang on a second, he's a young lad. Let him get refreshed. Let him have a little bit of a quiet period, and then he'll come again. And they all do tend to do that, apart from when you put a ridiculous amount of pressure on them.
Right then, let's talk about who's going to win this whole goddamn thing.
Wow.
So, I did a table yesterday. I wonder if it's still on Photoshop here.
Who have you gone for?
It is France. Only once I've did every single result, and I've got upsets in here. So this is literally my second round and semi-finals and that filled in. Let's just skip the second round more or less, because it's kind of obvious. Quarterfinals are where it gets interesting. I've got Portugal against France, one quarterfinal. Brazil meeting Belgium. I've got top in England's group. Yeah. These are tasty games.
Yes.
Spain, Argentina, and then Germany, England. Sorry.
No surprise there.
I don't know if we're going out on penalties. Maybe stick a quid on it, see what happens. The upset that I see in the quarters is Argentina beating Spain. And I have no basis for this, except that I think they've still got pedigree, even though they've got a terrible defence and an unexperienced goalkeeper internationally. I just think if that forward 5 or 6 clicks, it's game over. And I see a lack of goal scoring in Spain, even though they're solid in midfield and defence and best goalkeeper in the world. I just think that's the upset I'm going for there in the quarters, which then gives my semi-finals as France versus Brazil, Argentina versus Germany. And the crazy thing is, I think Argentina might be able to beat Germany. I've not got them beating Germany. I've got the final going down to Germany and Brazil/France, because I think if there's going to be a cock-up for Brazil, I think it'd be against a team like France, where they've just got an unbelievable...
My only concern with Argentina is the level of expectation that's going to be put on them.
I mean on Messi.
And on Messi. Everyone's, and this is what really frustrates me. You hear people say, "Is Messi a great?" Well, no, unless he wins the World Cup, you can't put him in the same category as Maradona. Not George Best. Was George Best not one of the best players to ever set foot on the planet? Did he ever play in a World Cup?
I don't think he ever played in a tournament. No.
Ryan Giggs. So you can't do that, because, and this it really frustrates me about when people compare managers, when people compare players, when people compare teams from different generations. You can't do that. Is this team better than that team?
Loads of fun to do, though.
It is loads of fun to do, but I think when you peel things back a little bit, you can't actually do that, because you could say, right, okay, well, if Messi doesn't win the World Cup, then he can't be mentioned as great as Diego Maradona. But there's a lot of other players that have won the World Cup that are nowhere near as good as Messi. So, you know, where do you hold it? You have to look at the era at that time, that generation at that time. And George Best, you know, from my dad and what have you, my dad's obviously a big Manchester United supporter, he says one of the greatest players he's ever seen, never played in a World Cup. But that wasn't down to him specifically. He was
a lottery of birth.
Exactly. So you have to take all that out of it, and that's why I look at an individual. And people are always comparing Messi and Ronaldo. I always say, don't compare Messi and Ronaldo. Just be so thankful that we are supporters when they're both playing in the same era, and appreciate them for what they both are, two of the best players that have ever walked on this planet. Instead of going, oh, Messi's better or Ronaldo's better. No, don't do that.
It's Ronaldo, by the way.
Let's just appreciate them both for what they are and what they've done in the game.
But the rest of that Argentinian forward line, at least, leaves you just mouth-watering. Di Maria, Aguero, Dybala.
Yeah.
As we were saying, if someone can just get a tune out of that forward four, me and you could line up at centre half. And I think
sure?
I'm pretty good in the air.
I'm a good talker. That's
Organiser.
Yeah.
Tackle him!
Why don't you do that?
But we'd have Willy Caballero behind us, which means we'd be fucked anyway. But I do think that if all you need is a knockout tournament football, and it's always won by not always, it's generally won by teams that have gone out with freedom and no fear, and they've just gone and played. And that is why I think that Argentina caused an upset there in the quarters. And I think it'll be a really tense game against Germany, with everything being on the line. Obviously, a repeat of the last final. I just think that's really tense. And then I just wanted to throw a spanner in the mix and just say, I think France beat that Brazil team, who, if I'm being honest with myself, Brazil are the favourites, and rightly so. It's a pragmatic Brazilian team, but it's also got a lot of flair and talent. And then I literally think that those semi-finals could go pretty much 3 of the 4 ways, with the winner coming France, Brazil, Spain or Germany. I don't think Argentina are good enough to win it, but I do think they could get to the final. When
you look at France and you look at the players that have been left out, it's absolutely incredible. My only fear with France, and it's always the same fear that I have with France, as it was with the Netherlands when obviously, you know, when they were qualified for the major tournaments, can they implode?
Yeah.
Can they play as a team? If they can play as a team, then without question they can win the World Cup.
They probably don't get matched if they can play as a team.
Oh, unbelievable. And the depth of the squad as well, the players that can come on.
Them and Germany, their third team that's not gone, probably on paper gives England a good go.
I did the Confederations Cup last season when Germany won it, and they sent a lot of their younger players, and they were absolutely magnificent. That's their second team. But what Germany...
Like I said, look who's not gone.
Yeah.
Their third choice goalkeeper, fourth choice goalkeeper, who's not gone, Leno.
I know.
Starts for England.
Yeah.
Starts for probably 80-90% of the teams in this tournament.
Sane. Unbelievable.
Dave's got a massive agenda against Sane, which I fully support, just for the banter.
He's been brilliant. But you go back from what Germany did, and I look at Spain as well. They have a conveyor belt. So you go back to Germany, 2006 when they hosted the World Cup. Everyone's like, wow, you've gone with a lot of younger players. But it was to start this cycle, developing players together. And I think that's something that Southgate wants to do. He wants to develop players under 21s all coming through this process together, because what happens is, a lot of the time what we've seen through England is that there ends up being a massive bottleneck. So I did the under 21s Euros about 3-4 years ago, and I did a comparison between the team with the most first team appearances and the least. England had the least first team appearances but had the most under 21 caps. So what there is, there's not a conveyor belt. There's a wall that they can't break past. They can't get past that. So whereas you see Germany, whereas you see Spain, a lot of these players that are playing for Germany together, a lot of these players that are playing for Spain together, played for the under 16s and the under 18s together, so they know each other's games. So it's just a conveyor belt and a procession of teams going for under 21s.
Is that the problem then? Because at the moment, if you say under 21s, I think 20s, 19s, 17s, England are world champions at all these levels, and they're putting in great performances. I was at the semi-final against Holland for England under 17s at Chesterfield about 4 weeks ago. Southgate was there actually, which I thought was great to see. And they went out on penalties. All left-footed penalties as well, Holland. Wow. And they all scored. What's all that about?
Left footers always score. Left footers don't miss penalties ever.
No, left footers miss loads of penalties. They do.
I don't remember one.
They do.
Apart from Stuart Pearce. And Chris Waddle.
Messi misses quite a few. Go and look at it. Lukaku misses quite a few. Left-footed penalties miss more statistically.
All right. I'm just speaking off experience.
But I've never seen that before. All 5 penalty takers left-footed and they all scored. Shocked. But anyway, that's an excellent team. The under-17 team in England at the moment, and that's not a freak. Obviously, the world champions under-17s last year over in India, I think it was. But there's no pathway into the first team for these players.
That's the problem. So what happens is, and you can go back years and years, is that 17s, 18s, 19s, possibly to 20s, there's progression because you're going from academy teams, under 18s teams, under 23 teams, so you're progressing all the time. But you used to call it when I was younger reserve-itis. If you play more than 35, 40 games for the reserves or what's in the 23s now, it's no good for you.
Oh God,
you will go backwards.
Is horrible.
When I used to do it for MUTV, the only difference between the two teams was the shirts. That was it, because they all played the same way. There was pure silence on the pitch. Whereas
really good technical, no aggression, no one really trying anything out of the box.
That is supposed to be the next step then to first team football. And one of the things is you'd speak to you'd speak to some managers or some of the coaches and it'd be like, it's all about the development. From my point of view, the minute you leave school, it's about winning. Because what happens if you're playing for the under 23s week in, week out and you're losing, but a coach is saying to you, well done, you played well then. You then go and play for the first team, you lose 3-0 and you're in the dressing room with a smile on your face and the manager goes to you, what are you doing? I played well. Well, we lost. So that's the problem where we're getting. So what happens is there ends up being a big bottleneck at the age of 20, 21 where players have played.
Well, if you're 20 at United, I could probably put some significant amount of cash on it that you ain't going to make it if you've not been in and around that first team already. If you get to 21, 22, ain't happening, mate.
When I was at the football club, I signed a new contract and I was 21 and I decided I was going to give it one more season. I played a few times in the first team the season before. And that was taken out of my hands because they sold me. But one of the biggest things was why I decided that I would have one more season is that I saw some lads that would...
You'd also been injured though, hadn't you?
That was a few years back. I'd been banned and what have you. But that was just my understanding because, you know, I'd got more involved with the first team, so I was going to give myself another year. But I was gone. I was going to be gone by the time I turned 22 because I couldn't be doing that. Because what I'd seen as a younger player there was that there was players at that football club that were 23 and 24 and they were still at Manchester United, but they were never going to get anywhere near the first team. But they were 23 and 24, so what other team's going to come and get them then when they've just played 200 reserve team games? And football's all about timing, and I think these players, they have to get the understanding of when you get to 21, something like that, if the time's not right for you to be playing in the first team, but you think you've got a chance, they go out and prove it. Because players are getting paid a lot of money now. It's the way of the world now. It's the way that football is, and it's easy. It's easy just to train day in day out, but you're wasting away your career. Whereas England's number one man at the moment, Harry Kane, he had loan spells. He wasn't afraid to go and do it because then you learn more about what it means to win a game. You know, you're playing with players that need that win bonus to pay their mortgage off. You're seeing a proper man's game and you need to be able to do that. So that's what I think needs to happen is that instead of players saying, well, you know what, I'm going to say, everybody blames clubs. Everybody blames, oh, you're keeping all the too many players, keeping all the too many of that. Ask yourself the question, how many of our players go abroad on loan? How many
started a bit of a trend recently, which is really
which I think is a big thing. I think it's huge. I think for the development of them as players, but for the development as
Willock and Sancho, and even Dyer, I think he was at Lisbon. I think
it was in Portugal. Yeah. But for the development of them as human beings to stand on your own 2 feet, you get everything done for you when you're at a big football club. You then go out. I went out to Belgium. There was a foreign language and things like that. I couldn't understand them. I had to embrace that. I had to embrace a lot of different things, and I came back a better and a stronger person because of that, because I had to stand on my own 2 feet. Well, what's happening now is that you're seeing these players that are getting a lot of money and they're resting their laurels at a real key time of their career.
That's 18 to 20.
Or 19 to 21 more so. And in them 2 years, where they're resting their laurels, they could be out playing football somewhere and making a real player of themselves. Look at this. Look at the England squad, for example. Trippier grew up outside the Premier League. Walker grew up outside the Premier League. Stones grew up outside the Premier League. Butland, Maguire, Rose.
Kane to an extent.
Kane to a certain extent.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the thing. Dele Alli grew up outside the Premier League. He had to do it the hard way. Jamie Vardy. That's what you're seeing now. A lot of players are actually doing it the hard way. So when they get up to playing and playing at the pinnacle, it means so much. And they've had to work so hard to get there that they're going to leave no stone unturned. Where I think now in academies, the worst thing they did was abolish the apprenticeship. There's no doubt about it because they don't have to do anything now. Now, leadership is something that you can't teach someone leadership. It has to come from within, and it comes from your experiences as an individual. Now, if you've got to do things, if you're looking up starry-eyed at a world-class player and you're cleaning his boots, or you're making his drinks, and his drinks aren't quite right, or the boots aren't quite clean enough, they're going to tell you. That does you the world of good. And the biggest thing as well you find is lost now is that a lot of the players from when I was younger and I was coming through myself, I could associate with the first team players, because you know what? They cleaned people's boots, they'd made people drinks, they'd had a rollicking because they'd messed up. So straight away that creates that bond, and you'd spend 15-20 minutes talking to them about it.
Yeah, just say, whose boots did you clean? It's probably a great icebreaker.
Exactly, it is. And all of a sudden this world-class player, you're talking to this snotty 16, 17-year-old kid, all of a sudden there's a connection.
Cleaning someone's boots.
There's a connection there where there's not that connection now, and it's very difficult. So
I know that there's careful what I say here. United put a load of players as ball boys, the 18s last season. I don't know what the players thought of it, but I know some of the parents weren't happy with it. And it's mad. It's a mad thing, because you think, what, 17, 16-year-old boys? What's wrong with being a ball boy?
I used to go home and tell my mates whose boots I'd cleaned, and they'd be like, what? They were like...
Whose boots did you clean?
I did Roy Keane's.
Jesus Christ.
Brian McClare's.
How terrifying is that?
Got to do it right then, haven't you? Do you know
right.
what? He was absolutely brilliant with me. I used to, because I think he was sponsored with High Tech and then Diodoro. He used to give me boots. He was absolutely brilliant, because, you know, if he sees people that don't have an edge on them, aren't trying to give it the big, and he's got all the time in the world. And he was brilliant. Brian McClare used to come down and we'd chat for ages, and every month I'd end up doing something daft, and he'd love it, because it'd end up in Chocky's diary. So, but yeah, you've got to understand. And for me, going home and telling my mates were like, oh my God, how lucky are you? And I was like, yeah, tell me about it. Look in my boot, I've got some hand-me-downs as well. And I used to absolutely love it. That's gone now. And that's the problem, because what's happening is, and people talk about too much too soon, like, oh yeah, well, so what, they get the money. It's not that, it's the fact of what it does to players. If you get a good amount of money, but it doesn't change the way you see the game, good luck to you, give them whatever they want. But the problem is, it changes a lot of people to think, I've made it, but you've not played a first team game. Marcus
Rashford's a great example of that. Obviously, like we said, he was above average academy player. I don't know what the contract he signed at United is. I'm sure he's all right for the rent.
Yeah.
But all you ever hear about Marcus Rashford is Jesse Lingard taking a piss out of him in them videos the other day when he's asking about London nightlife. He's like, bet you don't know what that's like. Great. I'm glad he doesn't know what that's like. I'm glad I think he's probably, you know, a pretty quiet guy.
But he's
just a dedicated footballer.
But that's an upbringing that's been instilled at Manchester United since Sir Alex Ferguson. You know, you can go back probably even before him, and I think it's something that's been carried on. And you know, it's so important that they have that. And you know, when you see someone like Rashford, he's got his feet on the ground, he's level headed. What's happened to him in the last 2.5-3 years? If anyone was going to get big-headed, it would be him.
He could have easily fell off the rails.
Of course he could have done,
couldn't he?
Yeah, he could have done. But what you do see is people bursting onto the scene, resting on the laurels, and then 2 or 3 years down the line, they're trawling around trying to get a football club, and they're going to a football club and saying, okay, I'll come and sign for you, and they're saying, well, we'll give you, I don't know, 3-4 grand a week, and they're saying, well, hang on, I've just been on 15, whatever it was, I'm not going to sign for that. And all of a sudden they fall out of the game, and it's a real shame. And it's something that has to be changed. It's something that has to be done about it, I think, in order to progress, because I don't think there's anything wrong with the previous regime the way that it was, but that has gone now, and hopefully with Southgate now you can start to get that conveyor belt, because like you said, there's some absolutely fantastic young players coming through.
Right, you bottled it anyway, asking who's going to win the World Cup.
Who's going to win the World Cup? I am going to go with...
I'll pull the list up here so you can see what I think the second round and quarters looks like.
I'm going to go for Spain.
Really?
I'm going to go for Spain. I just think that, you know, obviously Iniesta's still there, he's coming to the end of his time, but I look at Ramos, I look at PK, look at De Gea in goal. I think that
they might not concede.
Because a lot of people are always talking about, and I try and go opposite, so everyone talks about, wow, the front three of this team, the front four of that team. I look at Spain and I think to myself, you're going to have to do well to score against these, because we saw, don't care what anybody says about Ramos, love him or hate him, he's an unbelievable centre-back. And if he played for your team, you'd love him. Oh,
you'd love him. Can you imagine if he was a United player, he would be an absolute cult hero.
You know, and you've got PK who's proven that as well, and you've got like Busquets, Iniesta, you've got Diego Costa up front who's always good for a goal. You know, and good for winding up opposition players.
I think it's just their lack of goal scoring, but yeah, I absolutely agree. They're gonna be in the mix, and that's why I said I think I've got Argentina beating them, but I think that's an upset. I think that's an upset. I don't expect that. I very much expect that the semi-finals could be everyone's favourites: France, Brazil, Spain, and Germany.
Yeah.
I really think it could.
It's difficult because you can't write off Germany because they're just so efficient, aren't they?
And good. Let alone, I think Timo Werner's about to announce himself as an absolute megastar at this World Cup.
He's going to be the main man, isn't he?
He is so good.
Yeah.
Me and Dave went to Leipzig in January last year. It was well cold. It was about -20 on one of the days. It was the coldest place ever. And we'd been talking and hyping Timo Werner up before we got there. 4 minutes into the game, he gets this deftest little flick on the front post from a free kick, and we was just like. But then obviously the rest of the game he just ran it. They're a 4-4-2 team. Yeah. Excellent. Naby Keita obviously just signed. Yeah. What an excellent team that is. I mean, I think they're going to have with Forsberg at Sweden as well. I think they might have a few standout players at this. Yeah. Interesting to see. But Danny, thank you very much.
Not a problem, mate.
Go give Danny a follow on Twitter. Subscribe if you're new around here. There's more World Cup content coming out for the rest of this week. There's absolutely all sorts going on there. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Laters. Welcome to the Stephen Howson Football Channel. This is where I will take you through everything that I do revolving around football, be it that at Old Trafford or elsewhere. This is where you'll get your match previews, your reviews, your football vlogs, your scout reports, your transfer talk, your youth reviews, your documentaries, and anything and everything revolving around football. I absolutely love this game. Do me a favour and subscribe. Thank you for watching.